On a cold winter night in the year 1574, inside the sprawling Topkapi Palace in Constantinople, a faint glow of oil lamps flickered along the marble corridors of the Imperial Harem. Outside, the December winds screeched through the courtyards, but the deeper one went into the palace, the more the world changed, voices faded, footsteps softened, doors thickened, until finally only silence remained. It was in this silence that the most powerful and secretive institution of the Ottoman Empire lived and breathed. This world, where more than 300 women resided under one roof, was governed by rules so strict, so detailed, and so strange that even the palace guards whispered about them. By the late 16th century, these rules had already shaped the politics, sexuality, and succession of one of the greatest empires in history. The harem was not simply a place of pleasure, as European visitors wrongly imagined. It was a structured, disciplined, politically sensitive institution designed to control the most intimate aspect of the sultan's life. Everything inside followed rules: who bathed where, who dressed the sultan, who slept near him, who saw him at night, even the direction a woman faced when entering his private chamber. Nothing was left to chance, because in the Ottoman world, intimacy was power. Only the woman who gained the sultan's favor could become the mother of the next ruler, and therefore the mother of the empire. The origins of these strange bedroom rules began centuries earlier, when the Ottomans shifted from nomadic tradition to palace life. In the early days, Ottoman rulers followed Turkic customs that allowed open polygamy and tribal-style marriage alliances. By the 15th century, however, the empire was far too large and politically unstable for such free traditions. A single marriage alliance with a powerful Anatolian clan or a Balkan noble family could threaten the sultan's independence, so Ottoman rulers devised an entirely new system. They no longer married princesses from other families. Instead, they brought enslaved girls from distant lands, raised them inside the palace, educated them in refined arts, and trained them for potential motherhood. This eliminated political influence from outside families and kept the imperial bloodline under the strict control of the state. But controlling motherhood required controlling the sultan's bedroom, and that required rules unlike anything in any other royal court in the world. The harem developed dozens of customs to ensure that the sultan's intimacy did not become a political weapon. One of these rules governed the selection of concubines. A woman could not simply visit the sultan because she desired it, nor could she attempt to attract his attention in the hallways or gardens. Everything was ritualized. On nights chosen by the chief eunuch or the valide sultan, a girl was bathed, perfumed, and dressed in ceremonial clothing before being escorted to the ruler's private room. She was forbidden to speak unless spoken to. She was forbidden to look directly into the sultan's eyes until he acknowledged her. She could not attempt to seduce him. And most importantly, she could not return for a second night unless the sultan personally requested her. Another astonishing rule involved temperature. Palace records and memoirs of former insiders reveal that the sultan's private chamber was kept at a specific warmth before the chosen woman entered. This was not for romance, but for health and ritual purity. Cold air was believed to weaken the sultan's vitality, so eunuchs heated the room using braziers long before the night ceremony. If the temperature was not correct, the visit was postponed because the sultan's well-being was considered a matter of state security. The sultan's mother, the valide sultan, played an even greater role in bedroom regulation. She determined which concubines were trained in etiquette, which ones were educated in music or poetry, which ones sat higher in rank, and which ones were suitable to bear royal children. No concubine could dream of entering the sultan's chamber without the approval of this powerful woman. This ensured that succession lines remained clean and predictable. It also prevented deadly rivalries that plagued earlier empires. Yet, ironically, it created new rivalries inside the harem, where hundreds of women lived side by side, each dreaming that her son could someday become ruler. Perhaps the strangest rule of all concerned pregnancy. A concubine who became pregnant was forbidden to share the sultan's bed again until after childbirth. Once she gave birth to a son, she could never again be selected as a concubine because her role changed entirely. She became a royal mother in training, responsible for grooming a potential future sultan. She was separated from routine harem life, assigned new quarters, and guarded even more heavily. The Ottoman system believed that mixing roles created chaos, so sexual access and political motherhood were rigidly divided. Inside the palace, silence was another rule. Women were taught from childhood to walk quietly, speak softly, and move with controlled gestures. This was not only for elegance, but for surveillance. Every whisper inside the harem carried weight. A stray word could start a rumor. A rumor could influence the Valide Sultan, and that influence could shape the next choice of concubine. Silence maintained order in a world where ambition lived under every silk-covered surface. One lesser-known but deeply symbolic rule involved candles. When a concubine was chosen for the night, a eunuch lit a single candle outside the sultan's private door. If the sultan was displeased, he blew the candle out as a signal that the woman should be escorted back immediately. If he kept it burning, she remained until morning. This was a subtle method of communication that avoided embarrassing anyone. It shows that the Ottoman harem system, while strict, was not cruel. It protected the dignity of women by preventing humiliating public rejection. The eunuchs themselves were bound by their own set of unusual restrictions. They had no right to turn their backs toward the sultan or toward the Valide sultan's door. They had to bow at certain angles. Some were forbidden to speak, while others served as whisper carriers between the sultan and the harem. The chief black eunuch, an enslaved man with immense authority, enforced the bedroom rules as if guarding a treasure, and in many ways he was, because access to the sultan's body meant access to the future of the empire. As the 16th century progressed, these strange bedroom rules would become even more significant. They shaped the rise of legendary royal mothers like Hurrem Sultan, who transformed from a captured girl to one of the most powerful women in Ottoman history. They influenced political factions inside the palace. They determined succession patterns that changed the empire's course, and they created the mysterious, misunderstood mythology of the Imperial Harem that continues to fascinate the world today. This first section sets the stage for understanding how bedroom rules were not merely personal preferences but political tools. They were crafted to control desire, stabilize power, and preserve the integrity of a dynasty that ruled over 3 continents. As we move deeper into the story, the hidden mechanisms of these rules will reveal how intimacy shaped empires, how secrecy influenced politics, and how women living behind locked doors altered the destiny of the Ottoman world. In the spring of 1603, as dawn approached over the Bosphorus, the halls of Topkapi Palace buzzed with a tension that could be felt even through the heavy cedar doors of the harem. Sultan Mehmed Roman III had died suddenly, and the future of the empire hung by a thread. Inside the harem, women gathered in tight clusters, whispering behind veils, knowing that the succession of the next ruler would determine who among them would rise and who would fall. In this moment of crisis, the strange bedroom rules of the imperial harem were not simply traditions. They were the invisible architecture shaping the political destiny of the empire. To understand why these rules mattered, one must return to the central idea of the harem. Every political future of the Ottoman world began in the bedroom of the sultan. This was where heirs were conceived, where alliances were forged through affection, where rivalries emerged through jealousy, and where secrecy guarded the very heartbeat of empire. By the time Mehmed Roman III died, the rules had evolved into a complex system of control designed to prevent chaos. And yet, within these rules lived cunning strategies, ambition, manipulation, and the fierce desire of women determined to secure their place in history. The most influential of all was the Valide Sultan, the mother of the reigning sultan. Her authority was unparalleled within the harem. She oversaw the education of concubines, the scheduling of night selections, and the spiritual purity of her son's private life. She was the guardian of lineage, the protector of royal blood, and the woman whose decisions could destroy or elevate lives. Without her approval, no concubine could ever hope to enter the bedchamber. This was why the political battles inside the harem were often battles for her favor. The Valide Sultan ensured that even the most intimate details were regulated. Before any woman approached the Sultan, she underwent a series of inspections that combined ritual, medical knowledge, and symbolic meaning. First, she was examined by senior harem attendants to ensure she was healthy. Illness could never be allowed to reach the Sultan. Then she was bathed in a special pool reserved only for those chosen for the night. After bathing, she was perfumed with resins and oils brought from Arabia, Persia, and India. These scents were believed to calm the mind and elevate the spirit, preparing her for the ceremony ahead. But the rules went deeper still. The concubines selected for the night could not eat a heavy meal, could not consume alcohol, and could not speak loudly. She was forbidden from expressing fear or excitement. Her gestures had to be composed, her steps measured. Each rule served a political purpose, to ensure that the Sultan's private life remained serene, predictable, and protected from manipulation. A concubine who appeared too eager risked suspicion. One who appeared too reluctant risked being dismissed. When the moment finally arrived, she was escorted to the Sultan's chamber by 2 black eunuchs. These men, known for their strict loyalty, followed their own ceremonial rules. They could not look at the concubine directly. They could not speak except in ritual phrases. Their role was to maintain purity and obedience within the harem. Once they reached the door, they knocked softly and waited for the Sultan's signal. Only then could the concubine enter. Inside the room, the Sultan was always positioned so that he faced the door. This was a defensive tradition that descended from Turkic warrior culture, where rulers never placed their backs toward entrances. Even in the privacy of the harem, old customs lived on, merging with new rituals. The concubine's first action was to bow, not deeply, but gracefully, acknowledging both the Sultan's authority and the sacredness of the moment. She could not touch him unless he initiated contact. She could not ask questions. She could not refuse any order. The silence of the chamber symbolized obedience, harmony, and the unbroken flow of tradition. These rules, however, did not eliminate conflict. They merely transformed it. Ambition found new ways to move. Whisper networks grew inside the harem as women formed alliances or plotted against rivals. Small gestures carried heavy meaning. A misplaced smile, a shared piece of jewelry, or a whispered word in the courtyard could change a concubine's fate. Every woman dreamed of becoming the mother of a prince, and every prince had the potential to become sultan. This potential made pregnancy the most powerful currency in the harem. Once a concubine became pregnant, she rose above all others. She was transferred to more luxurious quarters, guarded more closely, and treated with profound respect. She no longer participated in the nightly selections. Instead, she became part of the sacred circle of royal motherhood. This transformation was one of the most dramatic shifts in the hierarchy of the harem. A woman who had once been just one among hundreds suddenly became untouchable. Her son's future was intertwined with her own. But this rise in status also came with new risks. A pregnant concubine was a political figure. If she gave birth to a son, she gained influence. If she gave birth to a daughter, her future remained uncertain. Some mothers of daughters lived comfortable lives but without political power. Others faded into obscurity, and some suffered silently as rival concubines targeted them with hostility. The palace was a world of quiet warfare, fought through etiquette, charm, and subtle persuasion. The chief black eunuch, known as the Kislar Agha, was another central figure in this political web. He commanded thousands of guards, controlled access to the harem, delivered messages between the sultan and his mother, and protected the harem from both physical harm and political intrusion. His authority extended even into the sultan's bedroom. It was he who decided the timing of appointments, the preparation of ceremonial rituals, and the enforcement of rules. In many ways, he was the gatekeeper of the future of the empire. He also oversaw the discipline of the harem, ensuring that no woman attempted to approach the sultan in secret. This included nightly patrols, surprise inspections, and a strict record of who entered and exited the inner chambers. The slightest breach of protocol could result in removal from the harem or reassignment to lesser roles. Even the Valide sultan depended on his honesty, and their alliance ensured that the harem, despite its emotional storms, remained under control. One of the most unusual traditions was the annual review of concubines. Each year, the Valide sultan examined the roster of women, their skills, their temperament, their obedience, and their suitability for future selections. Those who did not meet standards were quietly removed from the palace and married to loyal soldiers, scholars, or administrators. This was not punishment. It was a way to maintain balance, prevent overcrowding, and reward service. But it also reminded everyone that the harem, no matter how luxurious, was not a place for complacency. Through all these rules, one truth became clear. The bedroom of the sultan was not merely a place of intimacy. It was the political engine of the Ottoman Empire. The future of the throne depended on it. The stability of the empire rested upon it. The loyalty of armies, the rise of factions, the shaping of foreign policy, and even the survival of dynasties all flowed from the relationships formed in that silent, candle-lit room. The morning light over the palace gardens of Topkapi in the year 1648 revealed a scene of extraordinary calm, but inside the imperial harem, tension moved like an invisible current. Sultan Ibrahim, later remembered as Ibrahim the Mad, had turned the harem into a realm of unpredictable decisions, and the strange bedroom rules that had once protected the empire were now stretched to their limits. Although the system had been designed to keep the sultan's private life controlled and politically secure, the human nature behind the rules could never be fully contained. The harem was a carefully constructed universe, but within its silken walls lived hundreds of women, each with her own hopes, fears, loyalties, and ambitions. Section 3 explores how the rules functioned inside daily life, how women navigated them, and how these rules shaped the emotional landscape of this hidden world. Life in the harem was defined by hierarchy. A girl entered the palace as an asemi, an inexperienced trainee. She was taught not only palace etiquette, but also languages, music, poetry, weaving, embroidery, and religious instruction. From dawn till dusk, instructors refined them like precious stones. The most gifted rose quickly, the most obedient rose faster. Even in the earliest stages of training, the girls were taught the quiet rules of survival: never speak out of turn, never question a superior, never show jealousy openly, never let emotions overpower judgment. The palace did not reward impulsiveness. It rewarded discipline. As an asemi grew into a more senior position, she was transferred to the second court of the harem, where life became more structured. This was where the women began to understand the deeper meaning of the bedroom rules. They learned that every candle lit outside the sultan's chamber was a signal. Every closed curtain meant privacy. Every whisper behind a carved wooden screen carried weight. In this world, silence was a language and observation was power. Older women taught the younger ones how to read emotions without making them visible, how to interpret glances without letting others see their curiosity, and how to protect themselves from envy disguised as friendship. The women lived in suites arranged by rank. At the top were the Bas Kadin, the senior consorts. Below them were the Ikinsikadin, the second, dranking concubines, and then the mid-level attendants, The lowest group lived in communal halls where dozens of beds lined the walls. Despite the luxury of the palace, life here was not easy. Every day was a silent competition. A misplaced word about a rival could lead to demotion. A successful dance performance could lead to promotion. A mistake in etiquette could erase years of hard work. The harem was built upon rules, but human ambition shaped how those rules played out. Yet even within these strict boundaries, the women formed deep emotional bonds. Older women became mentors to younger ones. Some became like sisters. Others became like quiet enemies. And beneath it all were the unspoken hopes that one day they might be chosen for the sultan's attention. Not all desired motherhood or power. Some simply wished for recognition. Some dreamed of life outside the palace. Some prayed not to be chosen at all because the pressure of being near the sultan was overwhelming. But none of these dreams could be spoken aloud. Daily routines were organized with precision. At sunrise, the sound of a small bell signaled the beginning of the morning ritual. The women bathed, prayed, and dressed according to palace protocol. Breakfasts were eaten in silence, served by eunuchs who themselves followed strict behavioral rules. After breakfast came lessons, chores, or artistic training. Midday offered a chance to walk through the garden courtyards, but always in groups, never alone. The palace feared unsupervised interactions, and so the rules kept the flow of every moment visible and controlled. One of the little-known regulations concerned grooming. Before any concubine could approach the sultan, she had to undergo a specific beauty ritual. Her hair was washed with rosewater, her skin was rubbed with almond oil, her hands were dyed slightly with henna, her clothing was inspected for symbolic perfection. This was not simply about appearance. The Ottomans believed that disorder in the body could reflect disorder in the soul. Cleanliness and orderliness were signs of readiness, humility, and discipline. Another unique rule controlled the movement of light within the palace. No woman was allowed to approach the sultan's private chamber with a bright lamp. Only soft candles were carried by eunuchs in front of her. Light was associated with exposure and vulnerability. Soft light suggested dignity and secrecy. This tradition was so important that even after the empire entered the age of electricity, the harem maintained candle rituals for decades, refusing to let modern inventions disrupt centuries of symbolism. Within the chambers, the women slept in carefully arranged patterns. Senior women had private rooms, often decorated with silk brocades and mother of pearl inlays. Junior women slept in shared areas, but even there, the rules dictated sleeping positions. No woman could sleep facing the door unless she held a high rank. No one could place personal objects outside designated boxes. No one could light her own lantern at night. These regulations ensured safety and reduced conflict. They also reinforced the idea that the harem was not a home but a living institution. Food, too, followed rules. Concubines were forbidden from eating garlic, onions, or strong spices before lessons, or before presenting themselves to superiors. Certain foods were believed to increase calmness, such as sweet fruits, pistachios, and saffron drinks. If the sultan called for a woman unexpectedly, eunuchs checked her breath and appearance before escorting her. Even the smallest detail mattered, because the dignity of the sultan's chamber was sacred. Despite this strict environment, creativity thrived. The harem was home to extraordinary artistry. Women embroidered intricate textiles that later appeared in diplomatic gifts. They composed music, copied manuscripts, painted miniatures, and practiced calligraphy. The empire benefited from their talents. Even the bedroom rules encouraged creativity because the women had to find ways to express themselves without speaking too loudly or acting too boldly. But beneath the beauty lived fear. One wrong move near the sultan could result in immediate removal from the palace. Some women lived in constant anxiety. Others learned to master their emotions and used the rules to gain influence. The most skilled women read the mood of the palace like scholars studied books. They knew when to step forward and when to remain invisible. They knew which conversations to avoid and which alliances to build. Among them rose legendary women whose names still echo through history. Kösem Sultan, one of the most powerful figures of the 17th century, learned early how to use the rules of the harem to her advantage. She learned when to remain silent, when to advise the Valide Sultan, when to protect a child, when to guide a confused ruler. Her mastery of these rules transformed her from a young captured girl to the unofficial ruler of the empire for decades. Stories like hers reveal that the harem was not a prison. It was a political academy disguised in silk and secrecy. By the time night returned, the palace settled again into quiet order. The candles dimmed. The eunuchs resumed their posts, the concubines retreated to their quarters, and the rules that governed this hidden world continued their silent work. For the women of the harem, survival depended not on beauty alone, but on discipline, intelligence, emotional control, and the ability to navigate rules that shaped every breath of their lives. On the evening of July 18, 1703, as a soft summer breeze drifted across the gardens of the Topkapi Palace, the Ottoman Empire stood at a turning point known as the Edirne Incident. Janissaries marched, scholars debated, and statesmen whispered in panic. Yet deep inside the harem's heavily guarded walls, the women remained calm, their faces veiled in quiet dignity. They had seen turbulence before. They understood better than anyone the delicate threads connecting the Sultan's private life to the survival of the empire. For centuries, the bedroom rules of the Imperial Harem had shaped the very core of Ottoman politics. Now, those same rules were being tested by a changing world. To understand the consequences of these rules, we must look at how they shaped the empire's governance. The Ottoman state believed that controlling the ruler's private life meant controlling the stability of the dynasty. Every ritual, every selection, every silence, and every woman's placement inside the harem was part of a grand strategy. These rules created order inside a world where emotion, desire, and jealousy could easily spark chaos. They protected the Sultan from manipulation, protected women from each other's ambition, and preserved the sacred mystery of succession. The most significant consequence of the bedroom rules was the rise of powerful royal mothers. Because wives were not permitted to hold political authority, and because concubines received influence only through motherhood, the Valide Sultan emerged as one of the most dominant figures in the empire. Her authority shaped the fate of both harem and state. She supervised education, political alliances, and the emotional stability of the ruler. She ensured that the Sultan's children were raised in disciplined environments. Her decisions influenced promotions, marriages, and diplomatic gestures. For nearly a century, during the period known as the Sultanate of Women, Valide sultans from Harem to Kösem and Tohan played decisive roles in political affairs. These women did not wield swords. Their power flowed through silence, persuasion, ritual, and mastery of the same bedroom rules that others could barely understand. By controlling which concubines reached the ruler and which women raised future princes, they shaped the empire's future from within a world outsiders saw only as mystery. Their success shows that the harem was not merely a place of confinement. It was a strategic institution that allowed certain women to rise higher in influence than queens in many European monarchies. Another consequence of the bedroom rules was the structure of succession itself. Because the empire wanted to avoid rival families influencing power, the Ottomans chose heirs from among the Sultan's sons raised strictly inside the palace. This eliminated the possibility of outside noble families dominating the throne. The rule that a concubine could bear only one son prevented large numbers of princes, which had historically led to civil wars. Instead, each royal mother focused solely on the upbringing of a single potential successor. This ensured emotional investment, loyalty, and political clarity. Yet this system designed to protect the empire also produced dangerous outcomes. Limiting heirs meant that when a prince was weak, unstable, or poorly trained, the entire empire suffered. The bedroom rules had perfected the process of controlling intimacy, but sometimes at the cost of creating emotionally fragile rulers. Isolated inside the palace, princes often grew disconnected from daily life. Some became scholars, some became dreamers, some, tragically, became unfit to rule. These consequences reveal the fragile balance the Ottomans maintained between protecting the dynasty and restricting it too tightly. The rules also had social and cultural consequences. The harem produced generations of highly educated women. Many concubines spoke multiple languages. Many mastered arts like calligraphy, weaving, music, and poetry. These skills were not merely decorative. They became tools of influence. A concubine who impressed the sultan with her wisdom or artistic ability could gain access to discussions about reforms, diplomacy, or even military campaigns. These women shaped taste, tradition, and intellectual life inside the palace. From fashion to architecture, their preferences influenced the empire's cultural identity. One of the most fascinating outcomes of the harem system was its role in diplomacy. European ambassadors often feared the influence of the Valide Sultan because she could sway the ruler's opinion in ways no official could predict. Many foreign powers sent gifts to the harem, not to the sultan, hoping to win favor through the women who controlled his private world. Venetian ambassadors recorded in their reports that the harem was a palace within a palace, and that no political strategy was complete without understanding the influence of the women inside it. Despite the palace's efforts to hide its workings, rumors of the harem spread across Europe. Travelers exaggerated stories, mixing truth with fantasy. They painted the harem as a place of indulgence, seduction, and luxurious idleness. In reality, it was more comparable to a university blended with a political command center. The European imagination, unable to understand this unique institution, created the myth of the sensual harem. But the truth, preserved in Ottoman archives and memoirs of palace insiders, shows a world governed by discipline, rules, and emotional intelligence. The decline of these bedroom rules began when the empire shifted from Topkapi to the Dolmabahce palace in the 19th century. The newer palace introduced European-style halls, electricity, and open windows that replaced dim corridors and candlelit rituals. With modernization came a weakening of the strict traditions that had shaped Ottoman intimacy for centuries. The harem became less politically central, the role of the Valide Sultan diminished, concubines lost their influence. By the time the Ottoman Empire collapsed in 1922, the harem system had become a historical memory. But even as the institution faded, its legacy endured. Many descendants of harem women married scholars, diplomats, and officers in the modern Turkish Republic. Their knowledge of art, etiquette, and language enriched the families they joined. The stories of the harem shaped literature, music, and cinema across generations. The idea of women influencing power through intellect rather than force became a recurring theme in historical narratives. The legacy of the bedroom rules also continues in the way historians understand power. The Ottoman harem shows that political influence does not always require visibility. Sometimes it grows in quiet rooms, in rituals repeated over centuries, in whispers spoken behind closed doors, and in bonds shaped by discipline and tradition. It teaches that power can be emotional as much as physical, symbolic as much as political. In the end, the strange bedroom rules of the Imperial Harem reveal the complexity of human nature inside institutions built to control it. These rules shaped the birth of rulers, the fall of empires, the rise of legendary women, and the creation of myths that still captivate the world today. Behind every ceremony lived a truth about desire and ambition. Behind every ritual lived a story about survival and strategy. And behind every guarded door lived a world where the future of an empire rested on silence, candles, discipline, and the hearts of women who dreamed of destiny